Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Geeks Watch. Being spooky season at the time I'm recording this, I want to talk about the 1931 film Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, which you will see here. And yes, this is a VHS tape. Yes, I do still have these. So, I don't feel bad about spoiling the story, but I'm just going to give a brief outline. We all know Renfield goes to Dracula's castle. Renfield turns him into one of his servants. They travel by boat back to England. When the boat arrives in England, Renfield is the only person left alive, as Dracula has fed on the crew during the voyage. They come to London. Dracula takes an interest in Mina and Lucy. He eventually runs afoul of Van Helsing and John Harkin. John Harkin? Whatever. John, they confront him, yada, yada. It's Dracula. But what I want to talk about is more about the stuff around and this specific version of the film. This was not the first version of Dracula. This is actually based on the play, the Broadway play Dracula, which Bela Lugosi starred as Dracula. The first film, of course, was the silent German film Nosferatu, which actually, I learned about when doing my research for this, was done without permission of the Bram Stoker estate. Bram Stoker's widow actually sued the German company for plagiarism and copyright infringement and won, forcing them to basically shut down that film Nosferatu completely. She actually demanded that all copies be destroyed. I think one or two reels might have survived. I don't know if the full film survives, but I know that parts of it, some people kept it in there for collectors and stuff. Some versions of it exist at some point, some form or other. After the Broadway play was well received, an interest was done in making an American film, and Universal Studios actually bought the full rights to Dracula, the novel, the Broadway play, everything, so that they completely owned the character for approximately $40,000, which in the late 1920s was an exorbitant amount of money. This film was also made during the pre-Hays Code days. It's listed as a pre-code film. Universal initially wanted to cast someone named Conrad Veidt, a German actor, to play the part of Dracula, but the actor himself felt that his English was too bad to appear in a talking film. You have to understand that when this film was made, talking films had only been around for a couple of years. I mean, talking films didn't actually start becoming a major thing until 1929. So a lot of the actors around were still, transitioning from silent film to speaking parts. They then, when he backed out of the production, they wanted to get Lon Chaney to do it. Lon Chaney, Man of a Thousand Faces, but he actually passed away before he could start working on the film. So then they started hunting around for another person. I mentioned that Bela Lugosi had played Dracula on the Broadway stage, but Universal didn't actually want him for the part. They were hunting around for other actors. Bela Lugosi actually lobbied Universal Studios very hard to get this part. He wanted this part. And the only reason he got it is he actually took a reduced salary. He was actually one of the lowest paid actors in the film. I think he was paid a total of $3,500 for the entirety of his work for his entire work on the film. So the highest paid actor on the film was actually the actress who played Mina. She was the highest paid actor on the film. A little bit of trivia that I found out. So where else I can't remember. Something else I wanted to mention. I'm drawing a blank on this. This is why I should write notes, but I so rarely do. Excuse me. doing this film was actually a big risk for Universal Studios. We were still just coming into the talkies, as they say. And the reason it was a risk is because Universal Studios wasn't sure that audiences would accept a dramatic gothic horror story, as a talkie film. They weren't sure, so they were taking a risk making this. They weren't sure this was a huge, they weren't sure of the success of the film. And transitioning from silent films to talkies, and we were still in the era when vaudeville and stage plays were still a big influence. They were still blocking things as though they were stage plays or vaudeville. So, watching the film, a lot of the appearance of the film is still holdovers from the silent film era and the vaudeville and Broadway era. Another little tidbit that I found out: the famous scene where Renfield pricks his finger and it bleeds, and Dracula kind of leans in hungrily towards him. That was not in the original novel. That was actually something that the writers took from the Nosferatu film and placed it in this one. I'm not sure if it was in the Broadway play or not. Anywho, all that being said, this film was, at its release, a huge financial success. It was a very popular film. Although many of the actors have spoken that they disliked the fact that they were tied so deeply to the film. It was so popular, like, Bela Lugosi, and the actress who played Mina, whose name I can't remember, like, she was like, it's kind of a shame that I'm forever going to be remembered as this pale woman clinging onto Dracula's arm. And Bela Lugosi himself said he didn't want this to be the only film he was remembered for, in spite of the fact that he did make another appearance when they made subsequent sequels. Or I know he appeared in Abbott and Costello Meet Dracula. I don't know if he was a part of any of the other Dracula films. I think he was, but it is one of his most iconic roles. I do recall reading that Bela Lugosi was actually very distant on the set. He would like stand in front of a mirror with his Dracula cape and like rehearse, I am Dracula, and rehearse his lines and stuff, which some people thought was kind of ridiculous. But people also have said, the actors working on the set, that he was very distant. He was polite. He would come in the morning and say hello, good morning. Wouldn't speak to anyone the rest of the day. And when he left, he would say good evening, goodbye. That was it. He really was not very communicative with the other actors. I don't know for sure, no one really knows for sure, that he just did this not to be rude, but he was always very polite. But he was not friendly. He was not chummy with the other actors on set. He maintained his distance, I'm guessing, to preserve his character. Based on what I've heard from other people and looking at this, he seemed to be somewhat of a method actor. Like I said, he would stand in front of the mirror with his big cape, I am Dracula. Another thing too is that the impact this film has had on the vampire mythos. Prior to this, especially if you look at Nosferatu, vampires were seen as monstrous, inhuman, grotesque creatures. Whereas Dracula was sophisticated, well-spoken, urbane, a bit eccentric, but charming and handsome. So this film really set the tone for what vampires would be perceived as from then until today. I mean, you look at all the the vampire fiction that's in romance and in movies, and they're always very, very attractive people, very seductive. And many of them have been the portrayal has switched from being monstrous to them being misunderstood, or normal people who have to kill and drink blood to survive. They listen to music, they watch movies, they read books. They're not just constantly prowling on the hunt to kill. They kill to survive, and then the rest of the time they behave like ordinary people. So yeah, this film has had a huge impact on the Dracula mythos after its release. And this has also been I think this was also included in like the Smithsonian's what do they call it? You know, cultural icons or whatever they call it for like films of significance. So I thought it was appropriate to speak about this during Halloween season. I don't know when this will go out. I do record these somewhat in advance, so I'm hoping it'll still have time to fall into the Halloween spooky season. But there it is, the classic Dracula with Bela Lugosi. You know, one of the all-time greats that I grew up with, loving monster movies as a small boy. But as always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.